Welcome to the inaugural episode of Nightmare Logic, a podcast for a community of people that love and create horror films and other genre films. We're your hosts, Christopher Smith
and Peter Sawyer.
And sit with us as we dive into a little bit about who we are, why we're doing this podcast, and our project Last Call, which we are working on currently. So off the bat, I want to ask you, Peter, what are we doing here? Like, what is this thing that we're making?
With this podcast?
Yeah, tell me about the podcast.
Okay, so...
Actually, tell our fans about the podcast.
Our fans?
Okay. So basically, Nightmare Logic is a podcast that we've conceived to create in public. We want to take you along with us as we pursue our own projects in the horror and genre space and discuss the goings-on behind the scenes with, the different ways in which we are approaching bringing our own stories to life.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. We chose the name Nightmare Logic because it's something that kind of happens in horror movies. And the thing we just shot relies on Nightmare Logic, where reality gets blurred and things don't make sense and dread creeps in that way. So it just felt like a very fitting title for this podcast.
Yeah, that's right. And our intent with this podcast is really to gear it towards people like us, really, people who watch a lot of horror and genre films and TV shows and maybe other kinds of content like graphic novels or novels, and also are interested in creating their own, stories and magical worlds or what have you. And with this podcast, what we really want to do is shine a light on the process of creation.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of people, when they start making, independent films, short films, whatever, they often start with horror movies because you don't need stars. You don't need a super crazy budget. So it seems like a very good entry point for people.
Yeah, totally. Like, your creativity carries you a long way with genre films, and you can really think of a high concept that automatically elevates the story you're telling and can get attention. But also they're fun.
Yeah.
They're really fun to make. So that's why we're both drawn to it. The other aspect of this podcast is that we really want to kind of learn through other professional people in the field and through our audience, you guys. And hopefully you'll also learn from us going through this process and discussing our own films that we're making and the issues and challenges and successes that we've had along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said probably by a lot of people that the best film school is just going out and doing it yourself, and you will glean a lot from doing that. So we have a lot to share, and hopefully that's what you're here for.
Yeah, let's discuss a second, the format of the show, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about breaking or recent news in both the filmmaking and the sort of genre world around the media around horror and sci-fi, fantasy, all sorts of things, but probably leaning a bit more horror, and other things that impact creators, and by creators I mean more like filmmakers in the industry at the moment, particularly indie filmmakers, because that's primarily what we are. And we're going to talk about things like post-production, production, sort of the realities of indie filmmaking, writing.
Yeah, I mean, anything you can imagine that goes into this, we will have an episode dedicated to that.
Yeah. Okay, so you're probably wondering who we are, why we're doing this, why you should listen to us. So a good place to start would probably be with some introductions, I would assume. So Peter, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do in the industry and in filmmaking?
Right. So I am a screenwriter. That's what I've been.
A really good one.
Do well, hopefully. That's my thing, I guess, my lane. But recently, Christopher and I shot Last Call, what we're going to get into, which is this kind of ambitious 20-minute short film. And I was a director on it and a producer and kind of did a lot behind the scenes of that. So I feel like I really stretched some new muscles with that and got a better understanding of what it really takes to produce something. This year, I was a production manager on a film we shot in West Virginia.
A feature horror film?
It's a feature horror film. I'm not sure if I can go into depth on it.
You could say the title probably, right?
It's called Can't Triple Moon. And yeah, I worked on a commercial. So I kind of it's a gig economy, so you jump on things here and there. But
Yeah, and like kind of whatever capacity sometimes they need, if you're not busy doing something that you prefer more.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, totally. That's how it goes.
The end goal is, hey, let's make movies, right?
And what initially attracted you to horror filmmaking or genre filmmaking in general? Like, is this something you wanted to do for a long time?
Yeah, I guess that goes back to being a little kid. I was an only child, still am, as far as I know. I had to entertain myself, and a couple movies really left an impression on me. I would say the first one being Poltergeist. I remember being a little kid. My dad had a job that allowed us to have cable, so this is probably HBO, and it's that scene with the pool and the skeletons. And I'm just like, holy shit, this is wild, right? You don't see stuff like that outside. Most people, I imagine, don't. But I also loved ghost stories, and the scary stories to tell in the dark books as a kid. You'd run, try to find the books you wanted, and those just had the scariest artwork. And so it was just kind of like a thrill to take that home and like have it in your room with you when you're like 5 or 6 years old, being like, that thing's going to get me. But knowing full well that that's not real. So I've always just kind of been chasing that thrill, which is what got me sucked into, horror.
Yeah. And then where did you go from there?
I realized I always like getting a reaction out of people. To this day, it's still something I tend to do. But as a little kid, I would, have these play groups, and we'd be watching Gremlins, and it'd be the Gremlins are, getting wet and seeing bright light, and it's this grossest thing you've ever seen. And I would go up and lick the TV screen and get all of these girls are like, oh my God. Or it'd be like Ghostbusters and the close up of the ghost librarian at the beginning. Same kind of thing, kiss her. And yeah, it got reactions, which I think led to liking punk rock, because that music gets reactions. It was kind of shocking and what have you. I would then learn how to do magic, and I would teach kids magic tricks, because you do a magic trick for someone, you're getting a reaction out of them. So all that stuff, it's like all roads lead to like, oh, well, why don't I just try to make movies and get reactions that way?
Well, let me talk Pete up for a second, because he's not doing himself a lot of justice here. Peter, when I think about your typical like horror fan, and fan's not really the right word, but just like horror obsessed, Peter is like the person in my life that really embodies that. He's got full sleeve tattoos and leg tattoos, like just full of horror movie references and images. And he's got like a encyclopedic memory of, horror trivia and horror films and things like that. So he's really the go-to for horror knowledge in my orbit. And, I'm nowhere near as familiar with the terrain as he is.
Well, high praise. But no, it's funny. There's a horror trivia night out here, and man, that puts me to shame.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to that too, and there are some. I mean, let's face it, there's some really big nerds in that. But honestly, it's really impressive, the depth of knowledge, like crazy B cuts that people know. But you're still on the higher end of the curve. So, but Peter, hopefully will bring a lot of that knowledge to bear over our conversations over the many years and months ahead. But yeah, don't sell yourself short on that. You're a horror master.
Oh, I don't know if I'm not no John Carpenter. But yeah, I'm big into horror. I watch a lot of the movies, read the books, had subscriptions to Fangoria, the whole thing that all of us monster kids do. But I was like, this is going to sound a little, I guess, arrogant, but I think it drives anyone to make a film, is like, you see a bad one and you're like, dude, I think I could do a better job.
Oh, for sure. Or like like the thing about horror too is that, and this probably resonated with you as a kid, is that it very much, it's the genre that really it feels a little bit homemade in a way. These days you get a lot of highly polished horror stuff, but like a lot of it feels like there's a person that made it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what makes it special too. Like sometimes a movie could just not be good, but if you watch it and you see the seams of the monsters and all this, like there's a charm to it, especially in the 80s when like there was just this glut of that stuff coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go back and watch some of them now, and I'm like, hey, no, this is actually kind of fun. Like,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. So you were really into that as a young person. And did you go to like film school or did you go right into filmmaking? Like, where'd you go from there?
no, so I did go to Emerson College in Boston. I was a writing major, but I was not a screenwriting major. But I took a screenwriting class my senior year, and I really liked it. And so that was always in the back of my mind as kind of a plan.
But you didn't go straight from there into the industry.
No, because I was playing in a band at the time, and we wanted to tour, and my life was still back in the DC area. So for the next few years, that's what I did, was just fuck around in punk bands, and I took jobs like I was a substitute teacher. I learned how to do magic tricks, and I taught kids magic. And to tie this together with it, I would, on the last day of magic class, I'd be there for 2 weeks. Kids only like to learn what they like. And, a magic trick is, a miracle to them. So on the last day, I would be like, all right, the school is haunted, and make all this creepy stuff happen. And they would freak out. They'd all love it. And then I would reveal that it's all just fake, because
Just like movies.
well, part of it was to be like, yo, learn how to think, question things. Like, that's such a
Yeah, it's a big
important
theme
thing to do.
in magicians, I've noticed. So at what age did you get into filmmaking? Did you do that in the DC area, or like how did you get to where you are?
My parents did have a video camera, and I remember being probably 12 and doing these kind of really poor stop motion things with action figures.
I did one of those too.
And I had a friend, Brian, who was into horror, and he had one, and I think we made some really like, one person me with ketchup being a zombie, like,
Right.
kind of thing.
But how did you get from college to getting into film? Like, what was your process from there to there?
So then I had kind of this moment where I'm like, okay, maybe I can do monster makeup, because I do that for Halloween and wasn't terrible at it. And so I'm like, I'm either going to pursue this or I'm going to pursue screenwriting. And when I started to fool with both of them, all my time went towards screenwriting. So I was like, okay, this is a sign. Maybe I should go in that direction.
Were you in Los Angeles at the time? How did you get to Los Angeles? Real quick, just for you all following along at home, we are recording this and we both live in Los Angeles. So that's where we're coming to you from. But yeah, so how did you end up here?
So I am married to a lovely woman, Anya Sodova, and
Shout out to Anya.
she has been a oh Jesus Christ. She's originally from Moscow. She came to the United States, has one of the hardest work ethics of anyone I know. And she was willing to be like, all right, if this is what you want to do, fuck it, let's do it. And she was able to get a job out here before we moved. And so that made the landing a bit better.
Yeah, what year was that?
That was 2012.
All right. So you've been out here now for about 13, 14 years. And did you find that transition hard, and was it hard to kind of like get into the working in the film industry more?
That's a probably yes and no answer. I didn't think I was just going to waltz into Hollywood and be like, yo, here I am. You kind of have to earn your way in, but you do anticipate, or you do encounter a lot of dead ends that you think might lead somewhere. So you meet everyone and you're like, all right, maybe this person will read my writing and that'll open some doors. And no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the idea of how people make it in Hollywood has been, I think, grossly misconstrued over the years. But or maybe it was like that once, but now it's not the way you think it is, I think. Is there any other aspects of like your background you want to share right now, or are you?
I mean, I think bits and pieces of those will come up as we touch on
Definitely, yeah,
those
for sure.
moments. But Chris, about you.
Oh, let's go. Fire away.
Let's dig into you, man.
Well, well, first I'll just explain a little about what I do. Currently, I'm kind of transitioning from the documentary side of the industry, and as a documentary filmmaker, I directed and produced 2 globally released feature documentaries that I've been on all sorts of platforms like Netflix and Hulu and stuff. And those I'm sure I'll reference those throughout our conversations. But I also do a lot of editing documentary films, a little bit of reality TV sometimes, a lot of commercial work, a lot of social content for big brands like Amazon and things like that. I've directed a lot of social media content and other commercial work. And, just in the last year, Peter and I have ventured into this world of making narrative films, and something I've always wanted to do. And so now that's what I'm focused on at the moment. In addition to sort of, making a living through doing all those other things.
Right. No, for sure. What, pivoting from documentaries to narrative, had you been thinking about that for a while?
Well, yeah, I've been wanting to make narrative films actually since I was 12, 13, when I saw movie Magic on the Discovery Channel back in the mid 90s. I don't know if any of you were around listening, remember that, or around to hear it or watch it, but it was a really interesting show where they kind of got into the special effects. And note, I'm not talking about video effects, but like animatronics, models, and explosions and things like that. And I thought that's what I want to do at first. But throughout high school, I realized that I just really wanted to work in films. And honestly, I didn't know what capacity, but I thought either directing or acting. So I did a brief stint here in LA actually in 2001. And I came here because I got an agent, which I had no idea how lucky I was, because is actually apparently it's a fairly hard thing to do. And I just wasn't very good at selling myself. But during that period, to kind of make ends meet, I worked on a few sets as a PA and worked my way into being an office PA for John Singleton, who did Baby Boys, Higher Learning, and I worked on Baby Boy specifically. And then I was also doing Grip and Electric on more indie, non-union films. And I had mixed feelings about it at the time, because the industry back then, I think particularly as the Grip and Electric, there was a lot of hazing, and kind of they made it not as much fun as it could be on set, But I was also playing in punk and hardcore bands like Peter, so became my main focus for the next few years, and I kind of left and didn't do film for a long time. So, but eventually I came back.
Right. Yeah. Here you are. Are you at liberty to talk about any of that hazing? Because that's kind of why I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, hazing might be a strong term, but when you're green, film sets, for those who haven't worked on like a bigger Hollywood style film set, it's like an army. And it kind of has to make your day, to like get everything shot in a day that you need to. And because of that, they don't, suffer fools. And when you're green, you're automatically kind of a fool because you're new. They know that though. And so what it looks like is more just like, little jokes, nothing too serious, but also just being really kind of hard on you, to make sure you're always hustling and you're always like, doing the right thing. And like when you make mistakes, they're very quick to correct you, and they're not gentle about it all the time, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. I see. Do you recall the first time you were on what you thought was a big set?
Well, yeah. I mean, my very first time working on a set actually it was a short film for an AFI grad film. AFI is a film school out here that, is kind of an industry focused film school where a lot of people don't even go to it until they've had experience in the industry. And usually when they leave, they go on to do really big things. So the quality of their films, student films, are quite high, but they are still student films. So I worked on that for basically, I think it was like $100 a day or something very low. But when else was I going to get a chance to be a Grip and Electric on a set? And, even that set had the crew was probably 30 to 50 people. I can't really remember that well, but it was a lot of people. But the first big set, quote unquote, would be right after that. I met the key grip on that, who brought me on to Rent Control, it was called at the time. And it was the Sarah Michelle Gellar, I think, was Melissa Joan Hart was the star. And I decided that I wanted to pursue the band thing. And when I left, I was like, if I ever come back to Hollywood, or if I ever work in film again, I want to do it on my terms and not put up with that kind of treatment that I got on as a grip,
What brought you back here?
I had gone and done a bunch of things for a number of years, and I don't need to get into the weeds on that. One of those things was going to a film school program in Sydney, Australia. And that was in 2005. It was a place called Sydney Film School, which was just getting off the ground. It's kind of like a New York Film Academy type of film school. It wasn't at a university. But then when I came back, I went to university for political philosophy, and then went to grad school for public administration. I was working in politics. And then when I was in grad school, actually, I just kind of got bored and I bought a camera and I made a documentary film, which was supposed to be a short and ended up being a feature. And then that feature ended up getting into South by Southwest and, on Hulu. And I ended up like traveling all the world to promote it. But bigger than that, I felt like I had an impact. So I was trying to make a difference through politics, and I ended up doing that through film, which I didn't see coming. And I thought, well, maybe I should strike when the iron's hot and get back into filmmaking and focus on documentaries, which is how I ended up on that side of the industry. And I did that full time from 2012 till, I'm still doing it. So it's been 13 years, 14 or 15 years. I don't even remember.
You didn't say the name of the movie, Tiny.
Yeah. It was a movie called Tiny, A Story About Living Small, which was pretty popular on Netflix in 2014, 2015. It was also on Hulu and Al Jazeera America and a few other places. And, I for that, it was so low budget. I co-directed it with my girlfriend at the time, we're both also in the film. So if you watch it, you'll get to know me a bit better. Through that process, though, I had to do the filming, the editing, the co-directing, the co-producing. And, it was very low budget for a feature documentary. It was, I think, $30,000 all in, and about $20,000 of that went to the score. So,
well, I would also say you were building a house.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
that's right.
That's the insane part.
Yeah, I was also, I was building. So the premise of the film is that it followed me and my girlfriend as I built a tiny house, and we used that as like a story arc to kind of branch off and interview other people who build and live in tiny houses. And so I was building a tiny house and also filming myself doing it, and also all the other aspects of the documentary, the interviews and the, profiling other people, things like that. So I learned a lot of skills through that, honestly. And that's what enabled me to actually have a career. I was, went from there and almost directed, did cinematography and edited almost in equal quantities for the next 7-8 years. And then kind of leading up to and kind of through the pandemic, I ended up doing mostly editing for money. And I still directed my own projects on the side, including another feature documentary that came out in 2020 called Currency. It's two different words, current and then sea, but it sounds like currency. It's a play on words. Anyways, that's about illegal fishing in Cambodia. So yeah, docs were my passion for a long time, but in the back of my head was always that desire to make narrative films, which I wanted to do as a kid, and specifically, I just loved being transported to other worlds. So genre films are still kind of my first love. And, as a kid, I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction books. So to me, it's like my path and journey has been all over the place. I've done a million things, but it always kind of comes back to the same things. And those things always kind of work synergistically. And honestly, like, I don't think you can go wrong just trusting your gut and following your instinct,
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting because I think this is a through line in a lot of ways, but I'll say punk rock is one of those. You see some band that you love or that just blows you away as a kid, it leaves an impression. And then, hey, you want to do that. You want to pass that on. Hey, you want to get in a band. You want to create that moment for someone. Same with films, right? You see some movie that just blows your mind and you're like, man, I want to do that. I want to create something and capture it and share it with the world.
Yeah, I definitely gravitate towards a lot of creative things in life, and as do you. And for people like us, people like you, being creative is something that we have to do. And it's really just finding your medium. And oftentimes there are multiple mediums you can work in. And, film is probably our primary medium, but we both also played punk rock music and played in bands. I went to fine arts high school. I did painting and sculpture. But you find the thing that you feel like you can express yourself and that you're drawn to. And that's how we ended up here.
No, absolutely. So that's what this is all about.
It is. And hopefully, like, you're on your own journey and, we can play a small role in that, just be, even just by being something you listen to in your car. But we also, I think the underlying message of a lot of what we're going to talk about is that anybody can get into this and do this kind of work, but it takes a certain amount of resilience and fortitude. And part of what dissuades people is that barrier to entry, that understanding what to do. And we're going to demystify that.
Yeah, and you just did not see my face, but he speaks the truth. And if you have any experience in this, you know exactly what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
And it's not to say that we're where we want to be and we don't have a lot of growth to do, because we do. And you know, part of this podcast is challenging us to take our careers where they are now and like push it further, and doing that in public with you and bringing you guys along is part of the way that we're going to keep ourselves accountable and remind ourselves like why we're doing this regularly, and also share it with people, because it's a lonely pursuit. And, you know, having people to share it with is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better than myself, but it's a marathon, not a sprint.
A marathon, not a sprint.
I mean, that's a cliche, but for good reason.
Yeah. So in case you guys haven't told now from our intros, Peter and I have known each other for a really long time. We go back, I think I was thinking about this morning, in a year or two from now, it'll be 30 years. So like 28, 29 years. We met when I was, I think I was either a sophomore or a junior in high school, and Peter was a junior or a senior. And we were fast friends back then. And now, like, we went our separate ways for a while. Not that we ever lost touch, but I was living in Colorado for a long time. He was in DC and Boston a little bit. And, you know, we both ended up in Los Angeles sort of independently of each other, along with a lot of our other friends from that period actually ended up here and also work in the film industry. So it's really cool to see that, actually. Like, we have a friend named Dylan Markey, who's a stop motion animator did Robot Chicken, worked for Stupid Buddy Studios for a really long time, and a bunch of other things, including an Oscar-winning short that he helped animate called Fresh Guacamole. We got Elliot Thompson,
yeah,
who mixes all sorts of big films, including he did Swiss Army Man. He was all set up to do the Daniels' next film.
I thought it was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, he was supposed to do the sound mix for Everything Everywhere All at Once, but they had to push back the timing of it, and it conflicted with something else. But, you know, I just watched a documentary last night, and in the credits I saw his name for sound mixing it. So Elliot's out here. He actually mixed both of my features, including my first one was the first thing he ever mixed professionally. And
Elliot did score on the first short film we did.
He did the score? Oh.
Yeah, for Show and Tell.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, he doesn't really do a lot of score now, but yeah, that's another interesting thing is, you know, when I saw Elliot was doing sound mixing, he was in grad school at the time, and I asked him to mix our film because we had no money, and I knew him, and he agreed. But the success of it really, it didn't just help get my career off the ground, it helped him get his career off the ground. And it just goes to show that, like, collaboration and working together, which is what Peter and I are doing, is wonderful. It really pays off in dividends for everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so we should probably jump into the main topic of today's podcast. And really, we're trying to answer the question of, like, where do film ideas come from, and how do you know when a idea is good enough to invest your time and money into? And we're going to do that by talking about our experience over the last year creating our 20-minute long short horror film that's called Last Call. We're going to use that as a way to kind of like open up conversations around specific topics. And today we're talking about the genesis of that. We should probably first discuss what Last Call is exactly. And it's a 20-minute long horror short film. And we're kind of envisioning it at the moment as the first chapter of a feature film, which kind of has a number of chapters that are all about this bar in Hollywood that is haunted, and it's really the place where the lost souls of the city kind of wash up. The people, it's almost like a purgatory. And so this first story that we made the short film of that's called Last Call is about Wesley, who is this. How would you describe him?
Somewhat of a arrogant, thinks he's hot shit type character, producer, does what he wants, gets away with it, no consequences.
Exactly. We all know the type.
Yeah, like not someone you're necessarily rooting for, but interesting enough that you kind of want to see where this is going.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so he ends up in this bar, and he's there ostensibly to meet a friend, he thinks. But weird things start happening. You know, it's kind of like the vibe of Twilight Zone, you might say. Like, he starts realizing he's being haunted, I guess, by his ex. And by the end of the film, I don't want to like spoil it too much, even though we've already kind of spoiled it some, but it turns out that the bar is not what it seems to him. And so, we kind of made this as a proof of concept for the longer piece. And we shot it in January last year, and we've been working on it amongst all the other things that we do with our lives, editing it and all of that over the last year. So we just finished post-production on it. It's totally done, and we're just waiting to find out where it's going to premiere. And we're planning on doing the festival circuit with it, but really using it to do the feature version.
We're both pretty happy with it. And that, I mean, we'll get into the whole pre-production, the writing, post-production, production itself, but it was kind of a whirlwind. And so when you go through something like that, we shot it for 5 days, and then it's over, but like it just, your brain does not settle during this time.
Let's talk a little bit about like where the story came from, because so just so you guys know, Peter is the screenwriter. We co-directed and co-produced it, and I edited it. And but I came in a little bit later. So Peter was basically the genesis of the story. And so I'm going to ask him a little bit about how it came to be and how he, decided that this was worth making, and then, how I got involved in all of that. And we're going to take it all the way up to pre-production, which we're going to cover in a future episode. But yeah, Peter, so like, where did this come from? Like, where do your ideas for films come from in general, but, using Last Call as an example?
I mean, there's the what if, you take what if this happens with that, and does it sound interesting? So, I mean, ideas can hit you in the shower. And I say that specifically, you've probably heard this before, but it's because we're always distracted with our phones and stuff. You take a shower, there's nothing distracting you, so your mind actually has time to think.
There's nothing distracting you, but
but no, this one happened because I was with a friend, David Delval, who's a film historian, and he's sort of a notable person. Like he knew Vincent Price. He's been on all these commentaries for movies and whatnot. He's a bit older. And he's got some great stories, but we were in Huntington Beach because I like going to the beach, and he doesn't drive. So I was like, David, you want to go to the beach? Sure. So we're just talking, and I was like, we should shoot a short film. We should do something. And he's like, he was like, yeah, why not? And I don't remember which one of us said something about a haunted bar, but I know he got excited by that and was like, yeah, like the Frolic Room, which is a bar in Hollywood. And he had the title Last Call, which I thought was great because I always think finding titles is hard. And I was like, I'll figure it out, David. Don't worry about it.
This thing writes itself.
Yeah, well, not exactly, because you go through different drafts before you really know what it's going to be. So I was like, cool, haunted bar. I'll figure it out. So I came up with a draft. David liked it. And then he wanted to add these kind of Hollywood references that were pretty interesting. So there's a reference, a character says, there's always room for one more. That's from the anthology Dead of Night.
I had no idea.
And it's just a great line. Half the people watching it won't know, but someone will.
Yeah, that's the thing is that Peter and David love an Easter egg, and there's a number of them in here. With the concepting of the bar being this place where the lost souls of Hollywood wash up, there's a lot of, when people are pursuing their dreams, oftentimes at no cost, there's a lot of people who get churned up and spit out in the machine of Hollywood. And they, there are a lot of people who lives are ruined from pursuing this, for being honest. And not to be dark about it, but it is a horror movie, so we wanted to kind of like portray that. And so this bar is where those people have ended up as ghosts, essentially.
Yeah. So that's basically the gist of it. And it's interesting because as like a horror fan, there is not a lot of haunted bar movies. You have The Shining, right? That's the big one. Near Dark has a scene in it. There's Feast, but it's not so much in a ghost story besides The Shining. So it seemed like that might be somewhat of a fresh take on something.
Yeah. What's interesting about it too is that it allows us to explore a lot of different ideas too, and unique ways of there's a bit of it's like psychological horror there. There's not a lot of jump scares, but there's a lot of like things that appear and disappear without explanation, and unexpected
feels off.
Yeah, it just feels off. And, the longer film that we're envisioning basically traces this bar. It starts at current day and kind of works its way back in time until you see the beginning of the bar. And a lot of the characters in this story are actually from an earlier period and have been in this bar. And so as the film would go on, you'll see a lot of those people and a lot of the references in the first story. You like start to see where they came from later on in the film. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm curious though. You've written a lot of screenplays. Where do you get your ideas for screenplays?
It's often the I don't know, the most straight to the point answer, I think, is you write what you want to see. Like, that's always been kind of a thing, because I'm like, if I like these movies and there's other people that like these movies, maybe they'll like this idea that I have for this. And sometimes you start writing something and it's not a good idea. You don't know until you get into it. But if you keep going and you're thriving with it, you're going to be motivated to see it through.
So do you have a process to like sit down and like come up with exercises to come up with ideas, or do they come to you? Like, where does that initial genesis of an idea come from?
So for better or worse, I'm a plot guy. Like, that's the first thing I think of. I don't think of a specific character usually. I wrote a script where I wanted to see a vampire home invasion because vampires need permission to get into a house. I'm like, that's just a very interesting, how can you break that rule in a way that works in a story? So that was like an idea for another script.
So it's like a kernel of an idea that you then it kind of like flesh out into more of like a plot or story.
Yes. Yeah. And part of writing that I like is it's the process of discovery, because you don't have all the answers. You can outline. Some people are very meticulous outliners. I'm not one of them. I will outline, have the broad strokes. I will often, have that, and then I won't know what the climax is. And then I'll be like, okay, I'll jump to the end because I know the aftermath, and then work my way to that, and then figure out the climax as like kind of a reverse engineer technique. But everyone is different, and so what might work for me doesn't for you, or what works for you might not work for me.
So the reason I thought this topic was so interesting to discuss today was that I also write. I haven't written as much as Peter, but I've dabbled over the years and have become more serious about it in over the last year or two. And I often have a lot of ideas, but my mind plays tricks on me. And I'm not exactly sure if the idea is good. And even I'll be writing and I'm like, sometimes I'll be like, the more I write, the less I think it's a good idea. And other times, the more I write, the more I think it's a good idea. But there's a weird, and people in the audience might be feeling this too. So I guess for you, how do you know when an idea is good enough to invest the time it takes to write a whole screenplay for?
So I have one idea that I have not written. It's a very dark, it's like the bleakest thing I've ever thought of. But it kind of, I don't want to say it gave me chills, but it gave you that lightning in a bottle feeling that Ray Bradbury would talk about. And you want to seize those moments because it's like instinctual. You just know. You're like, there's something to that. And not everything I write has that. But if I think it's interesting enough, I'm like, maybe it'll lead to something. And often I just trust my gut. I'm like, can I write this? And I'll get through it.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like I start playing mind games with myself about like, oh, is this the right story? Well, as a someone who's writing primarily for me to direct or us to direct or whoever, I often have a voice in my head that's telling me like, oh, this isn't good enough, or oh, this is going to be too high budget. Oh, this is like good for like a third film, but not a first film. Or like, are people going to, I think a lot of people can relate to this. Like, are people, when I show this to people, are going to think it's ridiculous? And it's, such a vulnerable thing to share a creative project and be judged on it, particularly when you're trying to raise a bunch of money to make it and all these things. So how do you deal with that? Like, do you ever question yourself, or like, if you do, like, what do you do to get through that?
I mean, I guess I'm not shy at showing my work to people, and they'll tell me what they think, or I'll mention the ideas, and sometimes people will like one more than the other, and then I'll be like, oh, that's what people are more responding to. And I mean, I think it's like the high concept thing it jumps out at people because that's why they call it high concept, I guess, because it's a no-brainer. It's like you look at 30 Days a Night as a vampire movie or graphic novel or whatever Steve Niles did, and it's like, yeah, vampires going somewhere where there's no sunlight for 30 days. Oh yeah, and people were there. That's fucking brilliant. Right. That, you know, that's yeah.
Well, and oftentimes high concepts can also overcome a lot of the disadvantages of being an indie filmmaker. You know, like if you have a really good concept, it can carry you pretty far in terms of generating interest, and also you can have a smaller movie, but if the concept is unique, it shines through. And you know, like the Blair Witch Project is a good example, as like a time when there wasn't much found footage, if any. You know, they're like came up with a really cheap but creative concept for a film. And another good example might be.
Are you thinking found footage, or are you thinking
no, just high concept?
Just high concept.
High concept, low budget. Like Good Boy that just came out, right? Good Boy, very high concept, very low budget, and horror lends itself to that, right? Like it's a horror film told from the perspective of a dog.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cool thing about horror is, and this is true, I think, of all genre movies, is imagination, right? That really it forces you to have your imagination to think of the impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you had an instance though, when you out of the project you were working on and you either gave up on it, or if you didn't, like, how did you get through that?
Get through the first draft, then you'll see what you're looking at. I won't know until I get through it. And if it's not good, then you look at what's not good about it and how can I make that better? What can be improved? And if you get other people to look at it, they're going to see it for what it is. You know, and that's helpful too, because they'll see something you won't.
Definitely. I think that's where I kind of like fall down a lot, is like I don't get through the first draft. And part of that is a function of that I'm not consistent enough working on a draft where that momentum carries me through, because I have so many other competing things, as we all do in our lives, that I tend to, like, if something sits for like a month in between times I can work on it, then all of a sudden the doubts creep in. So my problem is that when it comes to features, there are many examples of like times where that break has been kind of killer to the creation of it, because I come back and I'm not sure it's a good project anymore, and I start doubting it and I doubt myself. And, you know, this is, I think, a perfectly normal thing for a lot of creatives. But I think what you said really resonates with me, which is you just got to get through that first draft.
Yeah, I mean, but there's also benefits of breaks, because if you take a break and then you know, a month and a half later, you pull it out of the drawer and look at it, you'll be much more objective about it. You'll be like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. Or, oh, God, Jesus. What was I thinking?
When you come up with an idea, then do you basically wait until after the first draft to determine that, like, this is a great idea? Or is it like, you know, it's a good idea and you know, then you start the writing process?
I believe in it enough to get to the end, or I'm stubborn enough just to pull myself through it. That's not to say every script I've ever written I finished. I have an idea that I'm proud of, but I don't know how to finish it, just because I'm like, I don't know how to get to the ending, and I don't want to like get too into it, but that's kind of something in the back of my mind. I want to finish it, but I just don't have the right answer, and I'm more interested in other things.
So bring this back to Last Call then. When did you've written a lot of things, but this was the first thing that you have put so much of your own personal, you know, time, energy, resources, and you've decided to make yourself. Like, at what point were you like, this is the thing that's worth doing that for?
So this, I guess, kind of makes it very specific to our journey with this, because if you're not in Los Angeles, then you're not probably going to have access to certain people and all that we do out here. As I mentioned, David Del Valle knows a lot of people who made horror movies in the 80s, which is when I came up, and, you know, love all that stuff. So he was like, Peter, this is good. And he was impressed with my discipline to get it done. I mean, it's not like I wasn't writing a script in like 3 days, but it was like, you know, 20 pages or something. So he liked it and was like, we should show Armand Mastriani, who is a director from the 80s. He did a slasher movie called He Knows You're Alone. That is where Tom Hanks got his SAG card, from that movie. So, and Armand also did Cameron's Closet, and he worked on Nightmare Cafe with Robert Englund. So having like a professional look at this was exciting because we got to sit down and he told us his thoughts and he was encouraging. He's like, yeah, just keep going, you know. And he weighed in on it, had a couple ideas, and one of them may have been absorbed into what we wrote. So that was like a step of this. And then,
well, from my understanding, you didn't set out to direct this from the beginning.
no, I think it was like, you know, I've written a bunch of scripts, like full screenplays. You send them to film contests, screenwriting contests, and hey, you placed, but you're not first, or that nothing comes of it, or what have you. So it can be very discouraging. But I'm like, with a short film, you can just go out and do it, and you probably don't need that much money. But I had no ambition to actually direct this or do anything like that. I was just like, I'll do my part, I'll write it. If it's good enough and other people see that, then maybe we can figure this out. So Last Call was written back over the summer of 2022, and Christopher and I both go back with our friend Zach Kreger, who probably doesn't need an introduction at this point, but he is a director who's done Barbarian and Weapons now. And Barbarian was coming out, and so I told Zach, I was like, hey, you should come out to Horror Trivia. You can play on our team. You'll have fun, and it's a good way to promote your movie. And I was hoping that it was before the movie came out, but it was right after. But neither here nor there. So I meet with Zach beforehand, and I'm telling him about this Last Call, and I'm, you know, excited about it for whatever reason. And he's like, well, yeah, you should direct it. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Time flies, and we get to a point where we're like, all right, well, why don't we do a table read with actors and test drive this and see what it's really like reading it with people. So then Chris, you and me and David, we got a location where we could do this. God damn it, I'm gonna keep calling you that, man. I'm sorry. That's okay. So Christopher, you, me, David, we got this Elks Lodge and got some actors to read it, and we thought the table read went pretty well. Which would then
that was a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah,
you know, in fact, maybe we'll at some point we'll put up a link to the video we filmed that just to you know, for posterity's sake.
So we do that, and then Jesse Merlin shares the script with director Brian Usna, who he did the movie Society. He's produced a lot of Stuart Gordon stuff. He did Return of the Living Dead 3. So then for Jesse's birthday, I meet Brian and I talk to him about this. He was like, it's a cool script, but if it's, you guys should do a anthology because you're not going to raise money for a short film. So noted. But Brian was very gracious with his time, you know, answering all my questions and stuff. It was great. He's a solid guy. At some point, and I don't know if this was before or after it, I think it was after it, we decide, well, why don't we shoot a little teaser for this? And so our friend Dano let us use his place, and we got Jesse in there, and we did this kind of floating torso, creepy bartender thing. It was modeled after a lot of like early 80s horror teasers. It doesn't reveal anything about the plot. It's just a creepy, like, oh shit, what is this kind of thing. So we shot that, and I guess we directed that together. And David showed it to one of his friends, who then was like, yo, if Peter did this, you should just have him direct the thing. Where Christopher comes in is prior to this, I think I'd written with you or for you a short film called Who Goes.
Yeah, it's called, well, we had a couple different names, but I think it ended up being either, I think it was Grief.
Grief or This Too Shall Pass.
Oh yeah, it ended up, the final name was This Too Shall Pass, which we should do, maybe we could do an episode on that because it was kind of fun.
I was like, Christopher, well, maybe this will be a good opportunity for us to work together. We could co-direct this, it'd be a fun thing to do. And so I was like, if I bring Christopher into this, you know, I know he will put his all into it the way I will. It's an opportunity for both of us to do something together. And you know,
we've known each other for so long, as we discussed earlier, that I think like perhaps that just feels like a more safe space, to be creative in, and you know, I agree.
So that kind of was like, okay, we're gonna try to make this, and then we fast forward a few months. I mean, it's all kind of a blur because this isn't just something we wrote and then we're like, all right, let's go shoot this. This was like a very strange, unique process, I think.
Which I think is actually pretty common for a lot of indie projects, particularly, first or second or third films, that are, they kind of have a life of their own and find their own way to the screen. Yeah. From my perspective, Peter called me up one day and was just like, "Hey, I've been working on this project with David, and we have what we think is something that could be really special. And I've been encouraged to direct this, and I don't know that I feel like I have enough experience to do it alone. And I thought it'd be fun to do it with you. Is this something that you might be interested in?" And I was like, I heard what it was, and I thought it was really cool, but mostly I just wanted to work with Peter, and it was a chance to work with a team of people to do a narrative film, which I've been interested in getting into. So, I quickly joined up, and we kind of set out on this weird kind of odyssey, you might say, like this journey that took us all sorts of places, because we had the short film, and we started kind of talking to people we knew that were producers and other people in the industry, and some of their suggestions, and if anybody who works in the industry knows that everybody has like an opinion about how to do something, and there's 40 different ways to do something. And so, when you're asking for advice, you're going to hear 40 different pieces of advice on how to do it. And, so we kind of tried a few things. We had some table reads. We did an early on table read, and then we did a more produced table read where we actually had an audience, and we had sound effects and actors really performing it. And that was a really fun experience.
And, well, that also was also sort of like a hopeful fundraiser that did not fund
exactly.
anything.
Yeah, I mean, and the funding is always throughout this whole process was the topic of conversation, and that's also a topic of conversation for another podcast. But when we were trying to figure out how to bring this to the screen, we had different ideas at different periods, and one of that was doing some just grassroots fundraising by doing this table read that was kind of a stage play. And then we also looked at working with producers and just making the feature version of this from the beginning. And that we spent some time spinning our wheels on. We had some interest, actually. We talked to a lot of good producers that well, there were smaller producers, but they had done several feature films and they were interested. So it was this circuitous route to getting to the point where we just decided to say, screw it, we're going to try to, just raise enough money to do the first story. And we did that through friends and family, which is actually not, I don't want to oversell that. It's a thing that a lot of people can't do, but also it isn't easy to do for anyone. And, but we just believed in it, and we had enough momentum at this point that we were able to get enough money together to actually film the first story, which is basically what we ended up doing. So we just wanted to kind of like give you the brief introduction of how the idea came and how we kind of decided to run with it. And then that kind of intro phase leading up to the point where we actually did pre-production on the short.
Yeah, I mean that in itself was a journey, but that was just to get to the starting point.
Exactly. That's the funny thing is like, I mean, you and David talked about this in the summer of 2022, and we actually filmed it in January of 2024. So almost
2025.
My goodness.
Yeah.
2025. Wow, I lost a year. So 2.5 years later, basically, and we were working regularly on it through that whole period. And it doesn't have to take that long, but the trick is almost always is the fundraising, and it took us that long to figure out how we were going to fundraise, where to get the money from, and actually get it. But what's really interesting about that was when we just decided that we were going to make it no matter what, we figured it out. But I think like you just have to decide to do it and be unstoppable, and things will fall into place. It might not be entirely what you want or what you envision, but it will. And that's ultimately what we had to do, is just trust that process.
Yeah, no, very, very well put. And I will say, and we'll touch on this later, but it's worth noting, like when Chris is saying we're working on this, it's like we were scouting locations, trying to find like what we could afford within our budget that made the most sense. And so that also takes a lot of time.
Exactly. You know, really figuring out what the lowest we could make it for and that meets our vision was a process, you know, and, you know, we could have maybe done it faster, but like we were learning about the best way to approach it. And luckily it worked out for us so far. And we hope it continues to work out. So that's probably a good place to leave it. But before we go, is there any last things that you want to say or any things that you'd like to plug? Like, got any projects, any films you're excited about? What do you got?
Yeah, I guess I got something that I can talk about. So David Del Valle invited me to do a commentary for a film called Nightlife.
Like a DVD extra?
Yeah,
commentary?
like a Blu-ray from this 1989 vampire comedy called Nightlife. It's not the zombie one with Scott Grimes and John Astin. It's a different made-for-TV movie, and it was actually pretty fun to watch. So we just recorded that last week, and so I got that coming out soon. So if you want to hear me and David, who we're going to have on here at some point, babble on about vampires and all this type of stuff, that could be fun. And I learned something interesting. This is completely random, but it just kind of blew my mind. You can find me on Letterboxd. If you don't know what Letterboxd is, it is kind of like a platform to log all the movies you've seen, and it's somewhat of a social media platform, but it's a bit different than what you'd expect. And so I was just like looking at how many movies I've watched on there, and I was like, well, how many movies were made in the 80s? And it was over 60,000 movies. I don't know if I know anyone who's seen 60,000 movies, but it puts it in perspective of how many damn films there are in existence.
In the 80s. You know, actually, I did when my first film was doing the festival circuit, I was invited to this filmmakers forum, and this kind of well-known indie producer, Ted Hope, was giving the keynote. And I remember a little factoid that he gave us and this is 2013, but he said last year, which would have been 2012, 50,000 short films were made. And I'm sure that number's only gone up because the democratization of filmmaking has marched on, and the barrier to entry is so low now. So there's a lot of short films out there. There's a lot of films, like Peter's saying, but even more short films. And most of them are never see the light of day, never find distribution. But well, with YouTube now, they can. And but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to see, guys.
Yeah, and I guess for me, my parting thoughts is I'm in the middle. Well, I just finished the most recent episode of Stranger Things. We're recording this. The final episode is dropping tomorrow, but honestly, not a big fan of this season. I'll leave it at that.
If you want to follow me on Letterboxd, my name is Glass Blood on there. Don't ask. I don't know what the hell I was thinking when I came up with that.
I know what you were thinking. You were drunk. Yeah, and you know, I'm not on Letterboxd, although I probably join sometime. Peter, any last thoughts or final words or film recommendations that you want to leave?
Yeah, I think it might be fun to leave every episode with a film recommendation for those who are craving something. I'm going to say this movie because it blew my mind, and I tell everyone to watch it, even though it's not suitable for everyone, but it's just a rare beast. And, you know, as you get older, it's harder to impress you. Like, it just is because you've seen so much. But it's a 1992, 91, 93 Australian film, Bad Boy Bubby. It is insane. I think they used 32 DPs to create every sequence for Bubby. Every scene is shot by a different one. But basically the premise is this guy is a 30-year-old living with his mom in a very depressing apartment that's like concrete, and the most screwed up shit happens to him. But she has told him he can't go outside because he needs a gas mask, and there's only one gas mask to use. So she'll leave and leave him there. And he kind of figures out a way to get out at some point, and the movie just keeps changing. But it's disturbing, it's hilarious, and it's endearing, and it's such a rare movie. If you've never heard of it, just just go in blind, because it'll blow your mind. I've recommended it to people, and we sent screenshots with their jaws dropped. It's
I haven't seen it. I'm gonna have to like check that one out.
high praise, but it is taboo. It's dark, but it's also endearing and hilarious.
Nice. I'm going to go ahead and recommend something you recommended to me this week, which is Ghost Stories. For a lot of you might be familiar with this, but Ghost Stories is a British horror film that's directed by Jeremy Dyson and Andy Nyman from like 2017, I want to say. It's really interesting because, it's on my mind because we are currently making a feature film that's kind of like an anthology, but it's really a story told in multiple chapters, and Ghost Stories is basically that. And it delivers on some scares, but it's also just kind of a sort of more interesting, kind of unusual take at Ghost Stories, and I really enjoyed it. I don't want to like give away too much, but it essentially follows this guy as he's a skeptic, and as he goes on this he's been sent on a quest to examine these 3 stories by somebody that he looks up to, that is meant to show him that he's wrong and that there are supernatural things. And there's a big twist at the end. I'm not going to spoil it, but highly recommend it. Really enjoyed it. It was a good, fresh perspective on a horror movie, I thought. And thanks for recommending that to me, Peter. And that will bring us to the end of today's inaugural episode of Nightmare Logic. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider subscribing and tell all your friends. And stop by our website at nightmarelogic.net, where you can subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss a future episode, and check out past episodes. If you're on Instagram, follow us at Nightmare Logic Pod. Our theme music written and composed by Lars Lang Peterson. We're your hosts, Christopher Smith and Peter Sawyer. Until next week, thank you.